I can handle it. If instead of failing, the person temporarily succeeds in stopping the addictive behavior, the greatest mind trick of all comes into play. It starts out very normally with the natural joyfulness of liberation. I can do it. I've done it. And it wasn't even that difficult. Why? I actually don't even have any desire for a drink anymore. I'm free. Before long, the natural joy will undergo a malignant change. It will be replaced by pride. The fall begins in a day or a week or a few months with the recurrence of an impulse to have a drink or a fix. It comes subtly and innocuously, certainly not as a conscious desire to resume the whole pattern of addictive behavior, just to engage in it once. Sometimes the desire appears unconscious. I don't know what happened. I honestly don't. Everything was going so well, and I wasn't even thinking about drinking. But all of a sudden, there I was with a drink in my hand, and I was already feeling high. The downfall can seem, for all the world, like a demonically mystical happening. It was as if there were another person inside of me I didn't know was there. All the time I was feeling so good about my success. He was in there waiting for the chance to take over. And in a moment when I wasn't looking and my guard was down, he did. More often, the desire to have a drink, a pill, or a snort just gently surfaces in awareness, like a harmless little notion. A drink would sure taste good right now. Boy, if I weren't straight, this would sure be the time to get high. Or it may come more philosophically. I haven't had a single pill for 3 weeks now. I wonder what it would be like. I bet it would be different now that I have no desire for it and I no longer am hooked on it. These impulses have a subtle but exceedingly important effect upon the person's feeling of success. Mm, 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 mm. Okay, where's that? Sorry. The joyful sense of I'm free is changing to I can handle it. For a while, I can handle it means the person feels she can fight off any impulses to engage in the addictive behavior. Before long, however, I can handle it means she thinks she can engage in the addictive behavior without becoming enslaved to it again. People have even been known to have a drink to celebrate their success at stopping drinking. Yes. The brilliance of this masterful mind trick is now evident. The pure joy of success and freedom has been transformed into an excuse for renewed failure and enslavement. Even after the failure occurs, one can continue to believe one is somehow handling it, moderating it. No more than 3 snorts a day. I only drink on social occasions where it would be embarrassing to say no. I only have 1 drink before supper. I take a pill or 2 only on the weekends. It's not the occasional beer that gets me in trouble, it's the hard stuff. On and on the tactics go until, again, it becomes painfully obvious that one is not handling it at all. Wherever I can handle it surfaces, the fall follows. Breakdown is the next section. The fall is tragic in the classical sense, an object crashing down after the pinnacles of pride have been attained. Once recognized, it brings guilt, remorse, and shame in bitter proportion to the pride that preceded it. Self-respect disappears. Suicide is considered. Without even the will to resist, the use of the chemical increases dramatically, further impairing judgment. A critically dangerous situation results. Through the haze of intoxication and depression, the mind continues its battle with itself. Increasingly bizarre forms of rationalization and resolution surface. Forms that are possible only because the person's reason has been cruelly eroded. Other drugs are used to substitute for the primary substance, and secondary addictions develop. Desperately seeking a way out, unrealistic schemes are hatched. If I could just get $100,000, my life would be different. I'm going to leave everything and start life all over again in another country. These grow into proportions that can only be called psychotic. If it weren't for my boss treating me the way he did, I wouldn't be in this state. He doesn't deserve to live. It's a lousy, rotten world anyway. Who cares what I do? I'll show them I'm somebody. It's all a matter of radio waves and vitamins. I'll eat lots of vitamins and figure out some way to hide from the radio waves. Fortunately, not all major chemical addictions progress to this degree of devastation, but all of our addictions, even our non-substance addictions, share similar dynamics. And the most serious of our non-substance addictions even share a similar ominous potential. Addiction to power, money, or relationships can drive people to distort reality just as much as can addiction to alcohol or narcotics. The next section is called collusion. The mind tricks of addiction share yet another quality. They are contagious. No matter how much it may be kept hidden, addiction is never completely individual. Is never completely. Okay, hold on. No matter how much it may be kept hidden, addiction is never a completely individual thing. From the very first stages of the attachment process, other people are involved. Friends, family, coworkers, and even professional helpers are affected by changes happening within the addicted person. Nearly always, some of their involvement helps to support the addiction. Their unwitting collusion has been well publicized in recent literature. It is called codependency. Codependency is not simply a matter of other people trying to cope with the addicted person's behavior. They actually create their own interweaving webs of deception. They may even unconsciously develop new, more inventive mind tricks for the addicted person to use. Ironically, it is the most sympathetic, compassionate, loving persons in the addict social circle that are most likely to fall into such collusion. Professional medical or psychological helpers are by no means immune to this problem. Physicians may prescribe other drugs to help people quit the primary chemical, thus producing multiple chemical addictions. Psychotherapeutic help may prolong the addictive behavior, while therapists and clients spend months or years trying to uncover non-existent childhood experiences to explain the addiction. It is as if the therapist teaches the addicted person to think, I have become addicted because of some personality defect or old psychological trauma. I know I'm saying that word. I can't say that word. I must spend months, perhaps years, trying to identify and solve my psychological problems. And while all this goes on, I have an excuse to keep being addicted. From the standpoint of the addicted person, all the mind tricks and self-deceptions have one dedicated purpose: to continue the addicted behavior. Likewise, there is only one dedicated action that really counteracts addiction, and that is to stop the addictive behavior. When the community surrounding an addicted person tries to help in any way that does not support ending the addiction, it will wind up supporting the addiction instead. If we cut through all the camouflage and false complexities that addiction creates, we come back to the fundamental issue of contradictory motivations. At one level, both the chemically addicted person and his or her immediate community know that the taking of the chemicals simply has to stop. Both the person and the community truly desire this. But at another, more insidious level of desire, they find themselves colluding with the addiction. For the addicted person alone, struggling only with willpower, the desire to continue the addiction will win. It will win because it resides, as we shall see, at the level of biological conditioning, and it is always operative. Willpower and resolutions come and go, but the addictive process never sleeps. The caring community around the person has more potential than this. Even though this community is bound to have its own mind tricks and mixed motivations, it has a chance for a better perspective. Most importantly, the people who care about a chemically addicted person have one another. Grace comes to fullness through community. Grace flows toward appreciating the truth, toward an accurate understanding of what is going on beneath the confused surface of addiction. During the first third of this century, Sigmund Freud and his followers laid the foundations for such an understanding. Psychoanalytic. The next section is psychoanalytic insights. Freud, Jung, and other psychoanalysts proposed that all mental activity was fueled by a psychic energy they called libido. The exact nature of this energy was never made clear. What is that? Freud saw it as a physical and sexual in nature, while Jung described it in more metaphysical terms. Both agreed, however, that psychic energy is invested in the activities, things, or persons that are especially important to an individual at a given time. The Greek word for this investment of energy is kathexis, literally meaning holding. Freud's original German word was Beziehung, meaning being occupied with. According to psychoanalytic theory, then cathexis is the investment of psychic energy through which we hold onto or occupy ourselves with whatever is important to us. Obviously, cathexis is the psychological equivalent of spiritual attachment. Oh my goodness. Freud felt that our cathexis were determined by two dynamics: the pleasure principle and the reality principle. He saw the pleasure principle motivations as seeking quick pleasure or immediate relief from distress. I want what I want when I want it. In contrast, he felt decisions based on the reality he found the decisions based on the reality principle required postponement of gratification in favor of more long-range or altruistic endeavors. In the light of modern behavioral psychology, Freud's pleasure and reality principles may seem outmoded, but they establish pleasure and relief of pain as important determinants of behavior, thus laying a foundation for the motivational psychology that was to follow. Psychoanalysts were also quick to point out that many significant cathexes occur unconsciously. The mind uses denial, repression, and a host of other defense mechanisms to keep us unaware of the truth of our motivations or to justify them falsely. For example, while I may know that much of my psychic energy is currently invested in writing this book, well and clearly, I may not realize that some of the energy is also invested in less admirable motives, like trying to impress or compete with my colleagues. Side note, sorry. But for people like me who really need to read this, like the really big words. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time reading this, y'all. Like, it's really good, but yeah. All right, continue on. My bad. In terms of the spiritual life, we may think we are seeking to love God with the purity of heart, but quite different and even conflicting motivations are normally present beneath awareness. Perhaps we are also trying to build a holy image of ourselves, or to meet the expectations of others, or to earn higher favor in the eyes of our image of God. From a psychoanalytic standpoint, then, our unconscious motivations keep us from true purity of heart. We are not alone in the struggle. The writings of spiritual giants throughout history reveal their repeated struggles to find purity of heart and wholeness of love in the midst of their own mixed motivations. Further, as they grew in purity, they became ever more humbled by the apparent endlessness of their attachments. This is one reason why authentic spiritual growth is accompanied by increasing awareness of one's own need for God's mercy rather than pride in one's holiness. It may also be why Jesus revered the simple honesty of the tax collector's prayer: God, be merciful to me, a sinner. To summarize, psychoanalytic psychology has contributed the following important insights toward our understanding addiction. Attachments form through the investment, cathexis, of psychic energy in certain activities, things, or people that bring us pleasure or relief from distress. Many of these cathexes are kept unconscious by means of self-deception. So our motivations are never completely pure and may be quite contradictory. Okay, the myth of the addictive personality. This is the next section. In my opinion, at least one psychoanalytic theory pertaining to addiction has proven more harmful than helpful. This is the concept of the addictive personality. In brief, it assumes that chemical addictions occur because of pre-existing personality defects. Early researchers observed that chemically addicted people seem to operate on the basis of the pleasure principle. Addicted people were called narcissistic, self-centered, manipulative, and devious, and they suffered from low self-esteem. The researchers concluded that some deep neurotic problem was responsible for the onset of addiction. When I began working with substance abuse, I noted that addicted people did indeed tend to have little self-respect, and they often seemed manipulative, devious, and self-centered. At first, I agreed that these were symptoms of an addiction-prone personality disorder. If that were the case, however, the symptoms should have been apparent before the addiction ever began. But detailed histories revealed no supporting evidence. Some people had become addicted as a result of seeking chemical relief from anxiety, depression, or other physical and emotional distress. Most, however, seemed to have led relatively normal lives before the addiction started. They had been capable of authentic respect for themselves, and in their dealings with others, they had demonstrated compassion, honesty, and straightforwardness. I had to conclude that the symptoms of addictive personality were caused by the addiction, not the cause of it. Suffering the extreme devastation of will and self-control that addiction brings, people necessarily become self-centered. The humiliation, shame, and guilt that erode self-esteem also breed deviousness and manipulation. Severely addicted people feel unworthy and incapable of getting what they need in straightforward ways, no matter what mask of competence or grandiosity they may wear. It is true, then, that a particular kind of personality distortion occurs with addiction, not as its cause, but as its effect. It is an addicted personality instead of an addictive personality. So addicted, like ADDICTED, instead of ADDICTIVE. So addictive or addicted. If we cannot blame addiction on some existing personality problem, we must look elsewhere for its causes. We will find considerable help in the more modern understandings of behavioral psychology. Next section is called Behavioral Insights. The roots of behavioral psychology go back 17th century philosophical idea called associationism. Yes. Beginning in the thinking of the philosophers Berkeley, Hobbes, Locke, and Mills, and later verified in direct experiments by psychologists, and physiologists. Associationism recognized that new patterns of activity or learning occur because one sensation or response becomes associated with another. The best known early experimenter in this arena was the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov. His studies of conditioned behavior in dogs spawned a whole field of studies of how human beings learn, adapt, and respond to the world around them. Pavlov inaugurated modern behavioral psychology. In contrast to psychoanalysis, and behavioral psychology restricts itself to objectively observable behavior. It avoids, please help me, Lord. Yeah, I'm getting frustrated. I'm sorry. It avoids considering interior, subjective experience. So not only is behavioral psychology more precise and verifiable than psychoanalytic theory, but it also focuses on dynamics of learning and habit formation, which have been somewhat ignored by psychoanalysis. In behavioral psychology, the law of effect replaces what Freud called a pleasure principle. The law of effect simply says that if a behavior is associated with an effect of pleasure or relief from pain, that behavior tends to occur more frequently. This is a component of learning called positive reinforcement. Conversely, if a behavior is associated with pain or removal of pleasure, it will tend to occur less frequently, negative reinforcement. Repeated experiences of association between behaviors and their effects constitute the form of learning known as conditioning. Simply stated, if I do something that makes me feel good, I am likely to do it again. If I keep doing it, and if it keeps making me feel good, I will probably make a habit of it. Once I have made a habit of it, it becomes more important to me, and I will miss it if it is taken away. In other words, I have become attached to it. The most important behavioral insight into addiction, then, is that the attachment takes place through a process of learning. The learning need not take place on a conscious, intentional level. It is not a matter of consciously noticing the effects of a behavior and then deciding to make a habit of it. Instead, the process takes place automatically at a deep physical level. In fact, most such learnings never do reach conscious awareness until they are already well entrenched, and many may never come into awareness at all. Because habits and attachments formed through this conditioning process are so deep and automatic, they can be extremely powerful and difficult to break. To spiritually sensitive people, behavior psychology sometimes seems cold, austere, unresponsive to the subtle feelings of the human heart. It is true that behaviorists try to base their observations on objective, measurable phenomena. They feel, rightly, that science requires precision. But it is precision that makes behavioral observation so helpful in clarifying the development of addictions. If we combine some relatively simple behavioral understandings with a few psychoanalytic insights and with the actual experience of an addicted people, we can form a workable and I think quite accurate model of how addiction develops through the process of attachment. Okay, the next section is how attachment happens. We can understand the attachment process as occurring in 3 stages, which I call learning, habit formation, and struggle. Stage 1, learning. The learning stage is characterized by associating a specific behavior with a feeling of pleasure or relief from pain. Let us say I engage in a behavior. It might be any behavior, intentional or unintentional. From taking a drug to counting my money, from biting my nails to thinking of God in a certain way. When I first perform this particular activity, I experience a feeling of pleasure or relief from distress. So now so here is let me see if I can show you what it says here, okay? So this is